Welcome, everyone. I'm Stephanie Jordan. I am one of the local food program managers at Sustainable Solano. And this is the MEHKO 101 webinar. We're happy to have all of you here. I also have on the call here tonight Connie Howard, who is Senior Environmental Health Specialist with Solano County. And so I will go through kind of an overview of what MEHKO is, the main requirements, kind of how it differs from cottage food operations, and every few slides I think we'll pause. And Connie, I'm just going to see if you have anything to add. And then we'll have kind of a more robust Q&A toward the end. So, all right, off we go. And feel free to drop questions into the chat. As we go along. So now I'm going to share my screen for the presentation part here. So we are doing this in collaboration with Cook Alliance, which is another nonprofit in California, as well as Solano County. Just a quick overview of Sustainable Solano. We work in three main areas. We're a nonprofit that works countywide. Our green infrastructure includes community gardens, backyard permaculture food forests, and some urban forestry. The local food program is what I work in, and we basically try to connect our communities with local food and local farms here in the county. And our community resiliency work centers around equipping communities with tools to advocate for themselves, typically around environmental impacts like air quality, flood risk, that sort of thing. Whoops, maybe I'll go back just really quick. Just a 30-second spiel about me. I am a trained chef. I went to culinary school in Chicago back in 2004 and had my own catering business for about 8 years before moving to California in 2011. I've had a food manager's certificate for about 20 years pretty consistently, and we'll be talking more about that later in the presentation. So if anyone has cooking thoughts or whatever, I'm happy to answer those. Also, toward the end, I just want to mention it now so I don't forget, I will be coordinating and setting up a couple of hands-on in-person kitchen sessions with anyone who joins these webinars. I'm kind of trying to secure the dates right now. It will likely be a couple dates in November, maybe one in Vallejo and probably one in the Fairfield area, but I want to see kind of where everybody is coming from so that we can position these close to where all of you are. All right, moving on. So Solano County Environmental Health is here to basically protect all of us, protecting the human health and then also identifying any of those factors that could potentially affect health. And there's a lot of different programs that are under the consumer protection area in the environmental health, or consumer protection, I guess, is the umbrella. So you'll see on the right that there are all kinds of different permits that they issue, all the way from restaurants to food trucks to the cottage food, and of course the Microenterprise Home Kitchen Operations, which falls under them as well, as does catering. So this QR code that's on here, if you want to scan it, this will take you to the consumer protection page of Solano County. And I will be sharing out these slides also to anyone who's registered, so you will get hard copies, so to speak, of this as well. So here we are. MEHKO is kind of short for Microenterprise Home Kitchen Operation. This came about back in 2018 per Assembly Bill 626, and it basically defined a new kind of code. So we have, a new retail food code, essentially. It allows you to cook food in your own home and then sell those directly to the general public. And it is kind of, I would say, an expansion and development from the cottage food law, which enabled people to also cook in their own home, but they were somewhat limited to items that are only shelf stable. So the MEHKO really expands this. In California, the counties had to opt in to the MEHKO program. And so not every county has them. So you can see there's a short list here of some counties that have opted in. I believe there may be a couple more outside of this list, but Solano is here, Contra Costa is here. I don't see Napa, I don't see Yolo. So we have a couple of us, but it is not widespread throughout the state. So there are some benefits to having a MEHKO. It can, ranging from inclusion to incubation in case you want to start with a MEHKO and then expand. And there's also kind of some innovative ways that you can use the MEHKO program. So this is part of, what's called the informal food economy. There's, a lot of people already trying to cook and sell food from their homes. We kind of like to call them pre-legal kitchens. So the point of this MEHKO program is partially to, get people to kind of come out from, doing this undercover and do it legally and safely. So there are different kinds of people who have MEHKO permits. There's just a quick list here. Many are first generation immigrants. A large majority are women. There might be people, from different backgrounds and multi-races. And then, it's also a great way to boost your own household, economic income. So in terms of, inclusion, just a few points here, it's definitely offering a lower, it's kind of like an easier entry point to being in food service as opposed to, trying to start your own restaurant with a brick and mortar location. It has the potential to improve access to healthy and culturally appropriate food, especially if you are in a neighborhood that maybe is not near grocery stores or restaurants. It can definitely build social cohesion, in my opinion, among communities who have MEHKO providers. And, you can also get some solid training in food safety and how to handle the food. And then, again, if, anyone has been trying to do this kind of undercover, this enables, a path forward so that you can have your own business. So just some quick numbers here on, startup costs. As I mentioned, starting from scratch, having a restaurant is very costly. A food truck is also not exactly cheap. And then if you have like a kitchen that you're renting, which is actually what I did when I catered, that was a shared use kitchen that I used in Chicago. It definitely fit my needs, but this could be, something that is the next level up after maybe you establish a MEHKO in your home. And then it's estimated that your MEHKO all in would cost about $1,000 once you get the application and the all the other things that you need there. And we'll kind of dive into that. So the MEHKO can serve as a place to start, as I mentioned. It can provide that incubation period where you can test out your recipes, you can test out your processes, you can, kind of decide, is this entrepreneurial step for you? And then from there you can definitely scale up. So it's really a good place to start if you have not had much background in the food business. So here's just a little list of what it could look like. I mentioned innovation. So, it's maybe not necessarily just, cooking in your home, a dinner. It could be a farmer having a farm to table dinner on their property. It could be doing a supper club. So here's just kind of a little, list of some different ways that you can get creative with this permit. All right, so here are three basic ways that the MEHKO can serve your customers. So you can establish this so that you have customers come in to your home and dine in. You can package the food and have them pick up and take out, or you can deliver it to the customer's location, which more than likely would be their house. And we'll get into kind of where you can deliver and where you cannot shortly here. So this is designed for direct sales only. So you cannot sell at a farmer's market or some other kind of larger community event. If you did want to set up some kind of a tent, and do that kind of sales, it's a different kind of event permit that you would need. And maybe Connie, I'll have you speak to that in a second. But so this is really basically kind of think of it as a, kitchen or entrepreneur direct to consumer type of model. Um, Connie, do you want to add anything about, if somebody did want to try and sell at a community event? I mean, it wouldn't be under a MEHKO permit, but could you give some examples
Right.
of maybe what would be needed?
Right. So the MEHKO permit cannot sell at special events. You cannot use the food that you cooked at your kitchen to sell at any community event. We do have a permit for that. That's called a temporary event food permit. But if you're not going to cook inside your tent, and you wanted to cook ahead of time, then you would need a commercial kitchen. You would not be able to cook your food at home and bring it to the tent and sell that way. So either you cook it all the day of in the tent at the event, or you cook it ahead of time at a commercial kitchen and then bring it to the event.
Right. Okay. Thanks, Connie.
You're welcome.
All right. So if you do have the MEHKO permit, however, everything needs to happen kind of on the same day. So the prep needs to happen. The cooking of the food needs to happen on that same day, and then also the service, which again could be having your customers come to you and eat in, or doing the takeout, or doing the delivery. So, the food, the hazards around food basically boils down to time and temperature. And so this is a way to kind of, mitigate some of those dangers. So everything kind of from start to finish just needs to happen in that same day. All right, so there are also some caps that are established. Again, this is just to kind of protect everyone involved. Kitchens are not, huge facilities with walk-in coolers and all of that. We're all kind of working with, our regular refrigerators and our regular stoves. So there is a cap on the gross revenue. And this is adjusted yearly for inflation. So your gross sales need to be, no more than $107,000. You also have a cap on the number of meals, so 30 meals a day and 90 meals per week. So it doesn't matter, it doesn't mean that you must pick 3 days and do 30 meals each of those days so that you have your 90. You can spread out your 90 meals in whatever way that you want. But this is just, when you look at it on like a per day basis, you can't go more than 30 meals per day or the 90 meals per week. So you can kind of work that however you want, however it makes sense for you and your production. All right, so this is something that sometimes is a little bit confusing, and I just want to kind of talk about it. So what is defined as a meal? So, it's essentially, you want to think about what one customer would eat or consume in one sitting. And so I believe environmental health, prefers individually portioned meals, like if you were going into a restaurant. And so let's say I come to one of your MEHKO businesses and I want to order a lunch for me and my office mates, and there are 6 of us. And so the thing is, I don't want to be walking out with like a big tray of, say, lasagna that might feed 6 to 8 people. It would need to be individually packaged, kind of like you would do, when you order individually at a restaurant. And then those portions are packaged, 6 individual portions to go. So, and these are things that you can definitely discuss with your environmental health supervisors on, when you're putting together kind of your, standard operating procedure and your menus. But as you can see, it really ranges. You can have kind of your standard plate with, your protein, vegetable, and starch. You could have, a soup. You could have appetizers or kind of like those small plate things. Beverages could even be considered a meal. Maybe you want to make just, protein smoothies or something like that. And that is the thing that you sell, and that is fine. And that can be considered your, meal. Baked goods falls into this category as well, and as do desserts. So I believe Connie and I were talking earlier about cheesecake. Is it, a little mini personal cheesecake? Maybe that's your meal, which of course could be shared with somebody else. But that's kind of how you could work a dessert into this as well. You could also kind of have maybe a combo, like maybe you have, let's say your lunch special is, some kind of a salad with some protein and a little piece of baguette and maybe a cookie. So you could combine these different things to kind of create your meal. So hopefully that makes some sense. All right. So there are some things that a MEHKO cannot produce and cannot serve. Um, so basically, it's the higher risk foods that exist in the world. Raw oysters are a no. Things that contain THC or CBD, nope. Homemade ice cream, raw milk products. Uh, During the last webinar we did, someone was asking if they could make homemade yogurt. Okay, that would be a no because you're working with, a dairy product and you're producing the actual product in your kitchen. We don't want to do any smoked foods or, acidified or cured, no vacuum sealed. And Connie, can you speak to like canned goods? I don't think canning, I mean, that's not really something you would serve as a meal that would be eaten right then and there. That's like something that's preserved, right?
Right, exactly.
Okay. And then anything that would require a HACCP plan would also not be there. So HACCP stands for Hazard Analysis Critical Control Point, and that's something that really like larger food, producers would be using. So, I kind of think of it as like, if you have a sausage making facility, something where you're dealing with a lot of raw meat or, potentially hazardous foods, those are the types of establishments that need a HACCP plan. So, you want to kind of keep it simple. It's just, the cook, and serve right away. All right. So in terms of your workforce, you can have the equivalent of one full-time employee in addition to family and household members. So that means you could have, let's say, two part-time employees that share that 40 hours a week. Totally fine. Your family and household members are not considered employees. So, if you've got some kids or some cousins or, a sister or a sibling or whoever that might want to help with this, and they're okay with not getting paid. Well, or maybe they could get paid. No, I don't know. Then, you can have them help. But in terms of paying your employee, they just cannot exceed 40 hours a week. Okay, so here are some different ways that a MEHKO can sell. Um, you can definitely, advertise via social media. You can set up a website, and you can use something called an internet food service intermediary. There are a couple of examples that are listed here, the hotplate.com and the cookconnect.com. Cook Connect is set up by Cook Alliance, and it's basically a platform where, the MEHKO owners list their businesses and list their menus. And, they are then subject to a short list of requirements. So, and you can see them here, they need to have their fees, openly disclosed. They need to have, a dedicated area for the MEHKOs to put their permit numbers. And then there's a way for consumers to report back any food safety issues. So what's most important here is that you cannot use things like DoorDash or Uber Eats. And really, I would not want to do that anyway, because once the food leaves your home establishment, you want to know that it's in the hands of the customer. If there's a DoorDash driver that comes and then they get stuck in traffic and I just gave them hot food, I don't know how long it's going to take them to get it to where it needs to go. And, the clock starts ticking once your hot food starts to get below a certain temperature and bacteria starts to grow. So I think this is kind of actually a great rule. So, but I know there has been questions and confusion around like, oh, can I post on Facebook? And, the answer is yes, you can. use social media. You just need to make sure that your food, excuse me, when your food leaves, it's going direct to that consumer. All right, here we are talking a little bit about delivery. So it's done by the MEHKO owner, the family or household member who is helping you, or that employee. So again, the third-party delivery apps are not used, and delivery must happen the same day. I know that we've kind of talked about that. Um, let's see, there was something. Okay, so Connie, I had asked you another question earlier. There was someone who was wondering if they can sell to anyone outside of Solano County. And so the answer was people from outside of Solano can come and pick up from you, but the MEHKO operator cannot deliver outside of Solano County. And is that because, let's say, Contra Costa, which is fairly nearby to where I live, is it because like they have their own MEHKO rules and regulations? Or I don't know. Can you speak a little bit about that?
Yeah, so the code states that it needs to be delivered in a safe time frame. And so we, as a policy, we just said that if you're delivering to any part in Solano County is fine.
Mhm.
So if a person lives in Dixon and they want to go to Rio Vista to deliver the food or Vallejo, that's fine because it's all within Solano County. But we can't have you start crossing county lines because we don't know how long it's going to take you to get to other places that are outside the county.
Mhm. Okay. Thank you.
Hmm.
All right. Here is just a point, which is the MEHKO permit cannot be used for catering. So a catering license is an entirely different type of license. It's definitely much larger. It does require a commercial kitchen, which is licensed. So totally different. Caterers usually are working in higher volumes, which would require a larger facility than what most of our homes are. So, again, you could be, delivering to your customers, but not delivering, again, I'll use the pans of lasagna. You cannot be delivering like 4 large hotel pans worth of lasagna to some kind of an event. So it needs to, again, kind of be in that individually packaged structure. And again, following the, no more than 30 meals in a single day. All right, I'm going to start talking about this, and I may need Connie to jump in a little bit. So this is a compact mobile food operation, or CMFO. So this is essentially something that could be utilized as an extension of your MEHKO once you have it set up. Um, so let's say you're trucking right along with your MEHKO and you want to sell more than the 30 meals a day or 90 meals a week. Then you can set up the CMFO and you can use your MEHKO permitted kitchen to send the food out via this little cart or the wagon or whatever it is that you have. So, a couple of stipulations is that the menu and the meals must be the same as what you're already producing under your MEHKO operation. But here it gives you the opportunity to just increase your volume that you're selling. And the meals that are sent out via the CMFO do not count toward those 30 meals a day or 90 meals a week. So it's like a layer that kind of can get put on top of the MEHKO. And then once you have figured out, your method for your cart or your wagon, then those transportation details just need to go into your operating procedure. So, Connie, is there anything else you want to add here or clarify?
Yes, so I just want to clarify that the CMFO is a separate permit
Okay.
So it's not included in your MEHKO permit. You would get a separate permit. You will fill out an application and submit and pay for the CMFO. So we do what we call a plan check review of your application and your CMFO, I mean, for your CMFO. And that is right now 2 hours at our hourly rate. So it's 178 times 2, which comes to $356 just to submit your application for a CMFO. Once we approve it and you pass inspection, then you pay your annual permit. So the annual permit right now is at $268 for a CMFO. But yes,
Okay.
it's a separate permit. But you can have it in conjunction with your MEHKO. You just have to have a MEHKO first. So you can't come here asking for a CMFO and a MEHKO at the same time. Your MEHKO permit has to be already approved and operating. We don't have a set time on how long your operation has to be, but it does have to be in operation before you can apply for a CMFO.
Okay. And just to clarify the cost, you said there was a $356 application, and that's a
It's a
one-time,
review. Yeah, that's a one time.
that's the
It's just to
one-time,
review because you have to submit paperwork for the CMFO.
right?
Um,
Okay.
and
And
yeah,
then after that, it's an annual permit fee of 268
currently, yes.
currently, right? Okay. All right. Thank you. Moving on. Um, all right, here's just a bit about how the Miko differs from the cottage food. So I actually did hold a cottage food license a few years ago just to kind of try it out and have fun with it for a little while. So this is limited to shelf-stable foods. So think about, things that do not have um, potentially hazardous items in it, like the creams and the meats and the custards and all of that. So you want to have, baked goods that can be held out on your countertop at room temperature. So it's things like, granola or cookies or there's kind of this laundry list here, the spice rubs and things that generally don't have to be refrigerated. And again, the cottage food license is different from the MEHKO. It's a whole separate kind of license. And the important thing to know is that you cannot have a cottage food permit and a MEHKO permit at the same time. So you need to pick a lane and decide what you want to do. If you want to, I will say though, you see probably at farmers markets a lot of people who do have the cottage food licenses. I think I got like some little banana breads or something from somebody recently at my local farmers market. So it'll have a label on it that says it's, produced in a home kitchen. There's a license number, address, all of that stuff. And so then that would be something that you could use, the cottage food license for. But again, and Connie, correct me if I'm wrong, I think you would also need to then deal with, like, if you wanted to go to a farmer's market, you would need to then work with the market on, those fees and the regulations and rules around, your tent and all of that. Cottage foods would be prepackaged, so you wouldn't have to have a completely enclosed tent, but you definitely need to, I think have like an expiration or something on there or a Best Buy. I don't know. Is that a standard on the cottage food stuff, Connie?
No, we don't have any expiration dates on it or
Okay.
Best Buy. They just need to be properly labeled with the business name, made in a home kitchen, your permit number, the ingredients, and the name of the food, and then the allergens.
Okay. All right. Cool. Thank you. All right. So now we're going to get into kind of the steps involved in order to make this happen. So, food manager certificate is first, and we'll kind of go through each of these in more detail. Then you do your standard operating procedures. You want to submit your application as well as your operating procedures, and then you need to have a home inspection. So first is the food manager's certificate. So this is a higher level certificate than the ServSafe cards. The food manager certificates are basically those that a restaurant owner or an executive chef or maybe even a higher level sous chef would have in a kitchen. So it is roughly 8 hours of coursework. When I was in culinary school, it was actually a class that we took, and then we took a big test. Nowadays, we're all on Zoom and there's all these online programs, so you can purchase one and then do it online and then have an exam online with a proctor who will just make sure that you don't have any notes around you and that sort of thing. For your employees, then they are the ones that need to have the food handler certificate. And this is a much quicker process. It's a little bit easier, about 2 hours and then an exam. A couple of names of groups that do the food managers, and I can send these out also later when I do the follow-up. There's one called alwaysfoodsafe.com, and another one is premierfoodsafety.com. I think those are, I don't know, a couple that I've used in the past. The cost is roughly somewhere between 80 to 150, depending on where you are and which group. But then once you do have your food managers, it is good for 5 years. And so then you don't have to renew it every year, which is good. Here's just a little bit of things that the food manager certificate class would cover. There's a lot of, different kinds of bacteria that get reviewed, how to prevent that from, ending up in the food. You're going to learn a lot about different kinds of contamination, physical, chemical, biological contamination of the food, how to properly clean and sanitize, and basically just how to keep you and your customers very safe. So it is worthwhile. Like I said, I've had it for many, many years, and once you kind of have it and work through the concepts in your daily kitchen life, it's definitely worthwhile because you are the one that needs to be, managing your employees, and you need to kind of be looking out for any potential problems or hazards that your employees or helpers or workforce, would be doing. So. Next, we have the menu and standard operating procedures. So essentially, this is just, what you're doing and how you're going to do it. Um, so you want to have the details that are listed here, your hours. In terms of the food employee hygiene and health, you'll probably want to have, maybe a little handbook for your employees or some kind of signage that just reminds them, always wash your hands, after touching the trash, after touching your face, after between tasks, all of that. You're going to have details on how your food will be prepared, what you're making, what equipment you're going to be using, your cleanup procedures, how you're going to be storing your equipment and also storing your food. And of course, the details on how your food will be delivered. Is it going to be driven in a car? How is it going to get from point A to point B? And then a little bit of information just about, your environment. I would probably also include, will people be eating in? Will you be doing delivery only? That sort of thing. And I believe this QR code just, again, goes to environmental health website, consumer protection. There's just a few things on the menu development piece. You'll need names, some catchy titles for your food, some descriptions, some ingredients listed, how you're holding it. So again, if you're making like cold salads or including something that maybe has, a cold sauce that involves mayonnaise, let's say I've got a potato salad with a mayonnaise-based dressing, you're going to want to specify that you're going to be transporting that in a cooler with ice packs or ice. And then also, just to let you know, you don't have to necessarily go into like every detail when something changes. So the example that I like to give is, let's say I'm serving a pasta And in the spring, my pasta dish is going to have asparagus and snap peas and mint, right? And then in the fall, I'm going to change my pasta and maybe it's going to have like roasted butternut squash and some sage, right? So you can just put on your application, pasta dish with seasonal vegetables, and you don't necessarily have to be, resubmitting all of this information every time you change out a vegetable. That being said, if you let's say you're making soups and all of a sudden you change to, making pizzas in the backyard with a brand new brick pizza oven that you got, then you're going to need to revise your standard operating procedure with the county because you are now, working with a different type of cooking process, different ingredients, and possibly even, a different type of delivery. So just kind of think about, as you're thinking through your menus, how can you keep it versatile and simple, at least to start, is what I would say. Not too many complex procedures or long holding times, because that's kind of when you risk bacteria growth. All right, this is the application, just a quick little shot of it here. And I think that QR code might get you to the actual page of the application. Not entirely sure. Um, so all of this is on Environmental Health's website. Just remember, your inspectors are here to help. If you have a great idea, but you are not quite sure how to make it work, definitely get in touch with them. They are there to help you figure out how to make it work. Here is a little bit about costs that I wanted to touch on. So we mentioned earlier that, the startup might be around $1,000. You're going to need probably some insurance. You can set it up as, I believe, a sole proprietor, or you could do a little LLC or something like that. Solano has a $507 annual fee. However, here's the great news, everyone. They are waiving it until the end of this month. So if you want to try and get this going and get your application in, you will not have to pay that $507 as long as the application is in the hands of Connie and her team by Halloween. So just a few other, excuse me, a couple other costs. You can see that we're a little cheaper than Contra Costa. Hip, hip, hooray. And then some other things at the bottom, just rough estimates of what you might need to spend your money on. Yeah, Connie, go ahead.
So I just wanted to make a correction on the waived until 10/31/25. We're starting to tell people because we have had an influx in applications submitted that it's being waived until our funds run out.
Oh,
Because there's only a certain amount of funds that are available.
mm,
And we weren't anticipating so many applications from your last um,
oh,
presentation. So I would not wait until 10/31 just because it right now is on a first come first serve up until 10/31.
okay.
So yeah, and I don't have the exact balance yet on which is what I'm gonna find out tomorrow, how much after the waiving that we just did for today, how much is left. But I do know that we had enough for, I believe it was 20 applicants.
Mm,
And I don't know how many we've gotten so far.
okay. Thank you for that important
Mhm.
clarification.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. We'll make a note of that too on any publicity and promotion that we do. Okay. On to home inspections. This, I believe, yes, this happens annually. And or if there is some kind of a complaint or suspicion of something not unsafe going on. So the inspector will come and really only check the areas that you are using, which would be your kitchen, your dining area, any food storage areas. You will need a bathroom with, hot running water near the kitchen. They'll check out the cleaning and trash storage areas. and then also check and see how your utensils and equipment are being stored and used. One important note here is that you cannot store food in like your second refrigerator that lives in the garage. Everything needs to be inside the actual house. So let's say, one way that you could kind of work this if you're short on space, my idea would be, you need to move all of your ingredients. Maybe you purchase them on Monday night. You're going to put all of those into your kitchen fridge when you get them home. Maybe put your own personal food into your garage fridge for the days that you're doing production. At least, that would be one idea that I would have. Um, is a bathroom required? The answer is yes. Especially, if you have, customers coming in and eating, I think it's probably important that they have a place to wash their hands. Connie, is there anything else you'd like to add here?
Um, no, I think that's about it.
Okay,
Yeah.
this is kind of a little bit more about the kitchen requirements. Um, it's pretty straightforward. Your fridge needs to be cold. Your cooking process needs to keep things hot. All of these temperatures you'll learn about in the food manager's certificate. What I like to say, just because it's easiest to remember, is 40 to 140, which is even safer than what this says. 41 or less, I would just say 40. Hot, go to 140. It's just easier to remember, 40 to 140. Your sinks need to have obviously hot water. You do not need to have commercial equipment. This was basically set up knowing that people would have basic residential equipment. Um, have space that's easy to clean. Um, yeah, pretty straightforward. Equipment, utensils in good repair. So, don't use any wooden spoons that are starting to split because that split in the wood is where all those germs would love to hang out. So, just a little bit more about this. The bathroom, pretty straightforward again. You need soap, you need paper towels, you need water, easy to clean surfaces. We're going to talk a little bit more about the water supply. So if you're in an incorporated area, any one of our 7 cities, you do not need to do any kind of testing. If you are out in unincorporated Solano County, then you will need to submit a test for various bacterias. And I made up another little slide on this. Here is more about the water testing bit. So this QR code will get you to the Napa Solano Yolo Marin Public Health Laboratory page on Environmental Health's website. So it's not as complicated as it sounds. You just need to go to the lab, get a kit, go to your water source, put the water in there, and then return it back to the lab. In the meantime, you can go ahead and submit your application to the county and just note that your water testing is in process. And then once all of the information comes in, get that over to the county. And then, if it passes, then you're good to go. So I just wanted to clarify that you don't have to wait until your application gets reviewed before going and doing this water testing, or vice versa. I mean, you don't have to wait for the water test to be completely done before submitting your application. And here's the address if you need it in Fairfield. All right, I just want to go through a few resources and then we will open it up to some questions. So here is your source here in the county. Again, consumer protection, the QR code will get you to their page, address, phone number, emails, all of that. If you need to speak with someone in Spanish, you can send to that email there at the bottom, the consumer@solanocounty.gov. I know that Connie speaks Spanish and she has at least two additional people on her team who are also Spanish speakers. So you can definitely be accommodated. And then here is some of our information. We will be posting on Sustainable Solano's website a dedicated MEHKO webpage where we will kind of consolidate a lot of this information as well. We'll have links to the county pages and Cook Alliance's pages. just so you can check them out and kind of have resources in another place. So just a quick overview of what Cook Alliance can offer. They have a lot of resources on their website. As I mentioned earlier, they are also a nonprofit, and they are very much in the business of promoting and educating microenterprise home kitchen operations. So they have a lot of different resources and, everything from, marketing your MEHKO to, again, setting up on those dedicated like sales websites to help you there. And then they also have a program called Cook Chat, which is just kind of like an interactive, call for MEHKO operators to chat and, troubleshoot and talk about what works and what doesn't and brainstorm ideas. And that is it. So I'm going to open it up, and whoever has questions, feel free to drop it in the chat or just do the raised hand, and we will answer your questions as best we can. So there was a question. I'm looking here at the chat now. Someone is asking about a whole cake. Would that qualify as a meal?
Yes, so we've had that discussion. We have not um, we have not come to a conclusion on that yet. Um, just because we can't determine if we would consider a whole cake one meal or would we consider it a couple of meals. So that is still out for debate. We did get that question asked already. We just haven't decided yet as a team what we're gonna do going forward because nobody's proposed it yet. So we're kind of, not really thinking about it because we haven't had that proposed yet. Because I think somebody else asked, what about a whole cheesecake?
Yeah.
And so I would say submit your application and your proposal, and that way it'll get us to jump on it and make a determination right away. Yeah, because code doesn't really say what about a whole cake. It just talks about no catering. So we don't want like pans, like you said, of lasagna or sheets of food being sold because that's more of a catering issue. Whereas a whole cake, I wouldn't consider that catering. We just haven't determined if we would consider it two meals, or three meals versus one meal. So, yeah.
Right, right. Okay. There's a question about selling homegrown or utilizing homegrown fruits and vegetables. Actually, Jen, I think I need clarification. You're wondering about selling the whole fruits and vegetables. So are you asking, like, let's say you have a lemon tree and you want to sell your Meyer lemons, or are you wondering about utilizing the lemons in, let's say, a chermoula sauce for your chicken or something?
Yeah, I hadn't thought about that second option, which is a good question. My initial thought was yes, the lemon tree just selling lemons or tomatoes or herbs or things like that, just as a whole fruit or vegetable or ingredient.
Yeah.
Right. So, um, to us, a whole fruit and vegetable isn't considered a meal. Um, but I mean, nobody's proposed it yet. Um, this is all brand new to us.
Yeah,
We have had people say, getting like making, I think herbs or some kind, or no, I think it was hot sauce. And we turned it down because to us, nobody's going to drink a bottle of hot sauce as a meal. So I would say, depending on what you are considering selling that's homegrown, I mean, somebody that's vegetarian, yeah, if they want to buy, your vegetables as a meal, I guess so. Um, so it just
yeah.
kind of depends. I mean, I wouldn't say a lemon would be considered a meal because I can't see somebody eating a lemon as a meal. Um,
So
but
what would you need a permit then to sell lemons or what
so
where does that fall under?
that's another question. we do have this thing called a garden registration, where you can get a registration. It's free of charge to grow your vegetables or your, fruits. If you are selling less than 25 square feet of any non-potentially hazardous foods, so it would have to be whole fruits, not cut up,
Mhm.
and vegetables that are raw. Um, and you're selling that less than 25 square feet. So think of like you got a table that's 5 by 5 and you set up your vegetables that you want to sell. That would not require a permit. You would just need a registration for your garden so that we know that, you're growing the fruit yourself or your vegetables yourself.
Mhm. Okay, and then I guess the same, so back to the cake, the whole cake question, that would be the same as if you were selling like cookies by the dozen then. Is that right?
So you would have to propose, and like I haven't had a proposal yet. So that would be something that we would look at it. So somebody would have to propose how many cookies they consider a meal. So, I mean, I would say if it's a dozen small mini cookies, maybe, but if you're gonna tell me that you're selling a dozen cookies that are like, what's that, cookie crumble size?
Okay,
I would say no, that's not a meal because
and
I can't see somebody eating 12 of those in one sitting.
yeah, agreed. And so what, again, what permit would that fall under?
If you want to, you mean, what do you
I
mean?
wanted to sell a dozen cookies at a time, crumble
That
size.
are like that are like crumble size,
Yeah,
that would be your cottage food. As long as
okay,
they're just cookies and they don't have any kind of filling inside. They're just your normal like chocolate chip or peanut butter or,
so that would be
sugar
the same
cookies.
then with like you mentioned canned goods, like let's say I want to pickle carrots and sell them.
Yeah.
That would also be cottage, or that's something else?
No, so there is no permit for, well, their catering permit would be for pickled. Anything that's pickled would fall under a commercial kitchen, which you would need a catering permit for.
Okay, or like canned, let's say you wanted to can tomatoes, that would be
Yeah.
the same thing.
Same
Catering
thing, catering
Catering.
permit and
Mhm.
yeah, a commercial kitchen.
at a commercial kitchen, interesting,
Mhm.
okay, all right.
But now I know that, let's say you have that garden and you want to utilize herbs in your Miko meal, maybe in your soup or whatever. That is allowed, right, Connie? You
Yes,
just need to get that
yes,
garden permit so that, so environmental health knows that you're sourcing some items from your garden.
right.
So,
Which is free of charge. It's just a registration. Yeah,
okay. Yeah.
to
Okay.
register the home garden, correct.
Okay.
Okay, and sorry, can I ask one last question?
Hmm.
Yes.
I'm in Napa County, which does not have a Miko adoption apparently, so who do I talk to in Napa County about suggesting that they do that?
Um, I would say they're maybe board of supervisors, if you want to take it up to their board. Um, yeah, I don't know. We were one of the first counties that got started. We just adopted it and we went forward with it.
So
Yeah,
who is the regulator in like if I wanted a catering permit in Napa County, where do I go for
right.
that?
So it's their environmental health department in Napa County.
Environmental health. Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Hmm.
And Lisette, you're asking about a whole loaf of bread. So kind of related to the cake question, I feel like that would fall under a cottage food license as well if you wanted to, um, make a loaf of bread and sell that loaf of bread. To me, that's more cottage food than Miko. Um,
Yes.
yeah.
And
Okay.
cottage food
Thank you.
requires a commercial kitchen? Sorry.
No.
No.
Okay.
Thank
No,
you.
it's another home kitchen, but it's mainly for products that are not potentially hazardous. So things that are shelf stable. So like breads, cookies, some cakes, that don't have any kind of filling inside. The reason why they started allowing it as a MEHKO was because you can't have a MEHKO and a cottage food at the same time. And so a lot of people that were baking wanted to get a MEHKO. And so the code now allows you to have the baked goods as a meal on your MEHKO. So yeah, you're just
So we
limited to
would need a
30 meals.
MEHKO first and then cottage. Is that
No,
correct?
no, you can't have both.
Okay, so like you said earlier, Stephanie, we would have to pick a lane.
Yeah. Pick a
Yes.
Okay,
lane.
got it.
Right. The cottage food is there for those foods that are shelf stable, not hazardous, like the loaves of bread, the cookies, the cakes, the granola, the, spiced nuts, anything that after you prepare it, it can sit at room temperature and not be at risk of making anyone sick or having bacteria grow. The MEHKO is designed for those meals that have more potentially hazardous foods, typically
it.
served hot. But here's a question for you, Connie. Well, let's say I have a MEHKO. Can I make my own bread? And I'm going to slice my bread and put together a sandwich and serve that as my meal.
Yes, as long as your bread can be made on the same day. So I've had a question, someone wanted to make their own sourdough bread and do like a clam chowder bowl. And I don't know how to make sourdough. I just happened to ask the person, well, can you make the sourdough in the same day that you're going to sell it? And apparently it's a process of how you make sourdough bread because it has to rise and proof rise and I don't know what else, but the way she explained it to me is it would literally take her like 12 hours just to make the bread. So I'm like, well, then you're not going to be able to do it all in one day unless you're telling me that you're going to start at midnight and so so yeah, so it just depends on if the item you're making from scratch can be made the same day and you sell the food the same day.
And served.
Right.
So maybe if you're going to do only dinner service and you have your bread on the side of your soup or something, but yeah, you'd have to start it super early in the morning, I guess, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah. One thing I realized I forgot to mention is if anyone is renting your home, you can have a MEHKO in a rental property. It's advised that you get some kind of an agreement or letter from your landlord, just stating that they know that it's happening and it's okay with them. But that was another question that had come up in the past was, the rental. So you can totally do it if you're renting home or an apartment or whatever, condo, etc. All right. Any other questions? All right. Well, thank you so much for attending. There was a question about, do we get a copy of the presentation? Yes. What we're going to do is kind of round up. Well, we do need to wait for this to kind of upload and do its thing up in the cloud. And then we will be posting this video and I will also be sharing out the slides. And I'll probably be sending out a little brief survey too, just to understand who everyone is and who would like to participate in a kitchen session too. So, all right. Well, I think that is it. So thank you again, everyone. Glad to have you with us.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
Stephanie.
Yeah, thank you, Connie, for joining us. We appreciate your time and your expertise.
And thank you.
Hi, ma'am. Are we done with the questions already?
Yes,
Okay.
we are. But if you have one, I'm happy to take the question and then I'll just need to circle back with you for the answer.
Oh, okay. Well, actually, just today I got everything set up and I've already forwarded my application and everything.
Oh,
I'm
great.
just kind of like not confused, but I'm mostly I wanted to confirm because I'm mostly a beverage only small business. So most of the things that I've gotten are like mostly food based, but I still went through with it. Like with the food manager and whatnot. But does that still fall under the MEHKO if it's just the matcha drinks with like shelf-stable syrups and no cooking, no reheating and whatnot?
If it's a matcha drink that is served cold, then I would say yes.
Okay.
And do you have a dairy product in there?
No, it's just oat milk. I wanted to keep it as simple as just base since I'm
Correct.
just starting up.
Okay. But even so with oat milk, once you open like the carton,
Oh,
then
right.
that needs to be refrigerated. So I would say yes, that is definitely a MEHKO. It would probably not fall under the cottage food permit.
Perfect. All right.
So,
I just wanted
yeah.
to confirm because I'm so excited. I got everything already there and then we got this webinar. So that's a lot of good information. So thank you so much.
Sure, you're welcome. Thanks for the question. All
Have a
right,
good
and
one.
yep, I'll include that too. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.